As a modern heathen, what are your priorities? And how can you use those same priorities and principles based on heathenry to help design your garden? Let's get into it. If you want to honor the land, connect with your ancestors, witness the gods, and save Midgard, you're in the right place. If it's your first time here, consider subscribing and then hit that bell so you don't miss any future episodes. Hey there, you beautiful heathen. I'm Matt Sargent. This is Iowa's Initiation. Thanks for joining. As I said, today we're going to talk about some heathen principles that help establish your priorities and how you can use these same principles in designing your eco garden. If you're not sure what the eco garden is, make sure after you watch this video, you check out this video. There will be a link in the show notes. So a principle that is found in heathenry is the principle of the Innagard and the Utangard, and it's basically the inner yard and the outer yard. The inner yard being anything that's within the fence on the farmstead or the homestead, and the Utangard, everything outside of it. And if you look at the arch heathens, as Jesse James over at Midgard Musings always likes to call the early pre-Christian heathens, you know, you had your family unit, your extended family, your tribe on the farmstead, on the homestead. So the Innagard would be basically your kin and maybe some kids, but most likely your kin, just your family. And the Utangard is everything outside of the fence. It's not to say that things outside of the fence, off of the farm, are not important, but they're not as important as the Innagard. And to better understand these concepts, when we look at the etymology, we have Midgard and Asgard. Asgard being the yard of the gods, as being the gods, Midgard being the yard of the middle of the yard of humans, and Inna and Utan being inner or outer. It's not that things outside of the yard aren't important, but what's inside the yard is the most important. And we can take this same principle and decide what is the Innagard for our garden and what is the Utangard. It all will be within the fence, so to speak. However, there are priorities in the garden, things that require more care. And so you want those in places that you visit daily. And when we look at the practice of permaculture, which is where you can really find the ecological garden and the principles for the ecological garden, you have the concept in your landscape design of zones, not to be confused with growing zones based off of your location. These zones are based off of areas that you habituate frequently or less frequently. So kind of your Innagard and your Utangard, so to speak, or your high priority and your low priority, if that makes sense. So zone 1 is going to be places that you visit every day. Ideally, these aren't far off the beaten path and they're close to the house. If you're in a small urban yard, this is going to be right off of your patio. And this is where you want to grow things like culinary herbs, because the closer they are to your house, hopefully like right off the deck, maybe on your deck even, the more likely you are to use them. If you have to walk 200 yards out into the garden to go get your culinary herbs, go get some chives to throw on a grilled lamb chop or something like that, you're less likely to do that, especially if it's been raining and it's muddy and you got to put on your boots. Oh my goodness. But if you have those culinary herbs right out the door, you're going to be eating them all the time. So your zone 1 is kind of your high priority stuff, your fast growing crops, your lettuces, quick turnaround stuff, and things that require more maintenance, daily irrigation, maybe a plant nursery if you're growing a bunch of baby trees. You don't want to forget to water them and watch them all die before you plant them out into their long-term location. Chickens, if you have to go collect eggs daily, you don't want the chicken coop, a couple hundred yards away. You might not want it right next to the house because you don't want the chickens pooping on the deck. I totally get that. It all depends on how you manage the chickens. But so zone 1 would be things that places you habituate all the time. Your zone 2 is going to be things that require slightly less attention, maybe not on a daily basis, They might still be irrigated, but it's an automated irrigation system. These are longer growing annual crops, things like corn or maize, wheat, rye, squash, things that require slightly less maintenance or a little hardier, maybe grapevines that need to be trellised. Cucumbers are a good thing because even though you need to kind of harvest them daily, you don't want cucumbers taking over, you know, your culinary herbs and your salad greens. Maybe things that take up a little more space, maybe espaliered fruit trees, small dwarf fruit trees that require a little more attention, a little more pruning, a little more maintenance than a larger tree. So these are things that you find in the zone 2. Chickens may be in zone 2, but since chickens need daily care, probably better off in a zone 1. That said, they only need to be checked on once a day, so maybe they're in your zone 2, or maybe they're kind of in that border range. Zone 3 is where you're getting into larger fruit and nut trees, full-size fruit trees, nut trees, a little bit bigger, hardier, things that require less maintenance. They still might be intensively mulched, but they don't need to be cared for on a daily basis, maybe not even a weekly basis. You might be looking into small plots of pasture, depending on the size of your yard. This might be a place where you keep goats or sheep. Big area, maybe cattle, horses, whatever. Zone 4 is kind of the same thing. Things probably aren't mulched in a zone 4. It's a little more wild, but it's still things that you planted intentionally. This might include ponds, places that you go fishing, maybe a stocked pond if you have that kind of land base. And then zone 5 is your wild zone, unmanaged. You let nature do its thing there. It's habitat for whatever is appropriate in your climate, and it's a place you just go visit. Maybe you cut some firewood there, but it is kind of the Utangard. It's important, it's a good place to visit, but it doesn't require your attention. I know a lot of you watching right now might be saying, but I live in an urban lot, I don't have that much space. You can still have all these zones, and an important thing to think about these zones is this isn't like an archery target where zone 0 is the house and 1's right around the house and it progressively gets bigger and bigger. This can be look more like a topo map. Zone 1 can really just be, say every day you walk from your house to your tool shed or your woodworking shed because you're into woodworking. Zone 1 can be along the footpath, right along the footpath. Things that are highly visible, you're walking that way every day, so you can check things out. Zone 2 can be right off the footpath. Maybe you don't have to step into that zone 1 garden, but it's right, it's, you know, just in the periphery of zone 1. And then, zone 1. And then zone 3, like I said, places that you don't necessarily visit every day, maybe once a week. So that's the inner yard, the outer yard, and how it can help design an eco garden. If you want to learn more, watch this video now.